Hi, this is Abe Roth. I'm in the philosophy department at OSU, and I'm going to talk a bit about the entitlement to reasons for action. So what is entitlement? Well, intentional action is done for reasons. It is constitutive of intentional action that they can be explained this way. So normally, the reasons for which I act are my reasons. I possess the reason in the sense that I represent the goal, and I can reasonably or intelligibly commit to it, and this guides what I do. But sometimes a reason is supplied by another and is not one that I possess. Nevertheless, I'm going to contend that my entitlement to the reason is such that it can count as a reason for which I act. So that's the entitlement thesis. That's what I'm going to argue for. And it's decidedly kind of non-standard. Okay, entitlement at work, reasons explanation in joint action. So let's imagine a case where you and I are going to a conference downtown by car. I drive, you navigate. You say turn left, and I do. Why did I turn left? Well, here's one suggestion. I'm turning left in order eventually to get downtown. But I suggest that what the reasons explanation has more structure than this. So it's going to be something like this. I am turning left in order to get onto Dunedin, in order to take High Street to get downtown. And the route-based considerations in this more complicated reason, they underlie your directive, and they figure in the intentional description of my turning, even though I do not myself have a clear sense of the route, okay? So the structure and the subject matter of reasons for certain contributions to joint or shared activity supports this claim of entitlement. Right, so I'm going to consider some kind of this example further shortly. But let's look at another case, right? This is entitlement at work in the case of collective harm and the makes no difference argument, right? So one concern that I have is the environment. Who wouldn't be, right? And so this kind of concern with the environment is often given as a reason for action. For example, commuting to work on a bike, right? Can we make sense of this sort of reasons explanation? Well, sometimes a morally significant outcome is a result of many individuals acting or failing to act, like climate change, factory farming, voting. Now, in such cases, what each individual does makes no significant difference in the outcome. So the individual has no reason to act one way or another. This is a kind of challenge that a number of people have discussed. For example, Nevsky. Right now, the basic thought here is that if I can't do anything about X, then how can X-related considerations serve as a reason for me to address it? But it does seem that the environmental considerations might be reasons that we possess collectively, right? Because enough of us acting appropriately might make a difference, right? So collectively, we might have this reason. The question is, how do I individually have this reason? Right. Well, if I'm entitled to the collective reason, then the environmental consideration could very well be a reason for my bike commute, right? So that's how I would rationalize my going for a bike ride. I mean, there are other reasons too, like exercise and relaxation. Okay, there are other kind of uses to which we might put this notion of entitlement, but I'm not going to get into that here today. So resisting entitlement, right? Now, some may want to resist the entitlement thesis and rationalize the actions discussed without invoking entitlement. So for example, in the drive downtown, I'm turning left in order to comply with your instructions. Or alternatively, I'm turning left in order to take advantage of your reliability as a navigator so that I can get us downtown. Okay? Now, these are very standard kinds of reasons, it would seem, right? Something that an individual could very well possess, right? And so why not use these instead of the kind of renderings that I have involving entitlement? Well, I suggest that these reinterpretations do not reflect the normal intentional structure of the action and the corresponding organization of the reasons. So for example, I think that number 3 wrongly foregrounds what in normal cases should be in the background. And in 4, a consideration that would rebut a possible defeater of the reason is wrongly identified with the reason itself. Okay, so how does entitlement work, right? Well, intention and reason preservation is a very cryptic answer here. I suppose I decide and correspondingly intend to take a short excursion next week. The following week, I act directly on the intention and venture forth. What is the reason for the excursion? Well, it's not going to be the intention. That would lead to a kind of illegitimate bootstrapping. So the reasons are whatever the reasons were that went into deciding and intending in the first place, right? You know, I need to get out. I've been like cooped up here for 1.5 years, right? And so I have that kind of reason to venture forth, right? So this suggests a kind of overlooked or perhaps under-theorized rational function of intention, right? So the reasons, note that the reasons that I have for the excursion don't have to be reconsidered and somehow activated when I set forth, right? Because the matter was already settled last week, right? When I made the decision to undertake the excursion, right? So the intention, what the intention does is preserves and transmits the reasons so that when you act directly on the intention, you act for the corresponding reasons. If somehow I have to reconsider those reasons, I have to kind of reevaluate them and relitigate whether to go for a bike ride, then I haven't actually decided ahead of time last week to go for the bike ride. Sorry, not for the bike ride, for the excursion. Okay, just confusing other examples. Okay, so now here's the thought, right? Reasons are preserved and transmitted by intentions. That's a kind of function of intentions. But notice that one is not limited to acting directly on one's own intentions, right? The intentions of others, like in commands or in shared agency, I can act directly on your communicated intention for me to turn left, okay? And collective intentions or institutional intentions. I can act directly on some collective intention to, for example, cut back on driving the tank to work and to bike instead. So these possibilities suggest that the rational function of reason preservation and transmission can work across people. And that is underlies the idea of entitlement to those reasons. Okay. Now, a lot of questions remain about the cognitive and the social infrastructure associated with entitlement, not to mention the relevant normative issues. For example, right, you know, I'm assuming here that there are collective reasons. Right? Now, this is something that is debated in the literature, and different people have different views about it. I'm just saying that, you know, if you adopt this idea of there being collective reasons, that's not quite enough for the problem that I'm trying to address here, right? We also need this idea of kind of transmission and entitlement, okay? And then furthermore, I've also kind of taken for granted here that there are such things as collective intentions, right? In addition to collective reasons, right? That's also something that people debate, and, you know, you have lots of different views about what a collective intention is. And I think some of those views are not going to be easily reconciled with what the kind of use I'm putting intentions to here. Okay? But those are issues that I have to kind of address on some other occasion. Okay. So a host of normative issues as well, like, for example, where do people get the authority to issue intentions to one another, right? Okay, I'm kind of bracketing those issues. Those are important issues, but I'm not going to get into that here in this talk, right? Now, so there are a lot of questions here but like, I think the basic idea is that the ability to act directly on the intentions of others is going to be crucial. Okay, so shared agency and, let me just mention before moving on to the next section that, the basic strategy here is that, like, for example, in the collective case, it's not just that there's a special kind of reason, a collective reason, right, to, act in certain ways, right? What's going on is that when one acts on, the general idea is that, like, it's not just that there's a special reason that we act on, right? We need to kind of rethink the nature of the agency being exercised when we act on that reason, right? And it's not merely acting on a reason that happens to be a special reason, right? It's more like the agency exercised when you act on a prior intention, okay? And that has to kind of come into the picture in order to understand how it is that we can be acting on the reasons of others or on collective reasons. Okay. So now I want to get into a further kind of challenge. So for example, the topic of shared agency and proprietary reasons, right? So there appears to be room for significant divergence of reasons for engaging in joint activity. Sharing a ride with somebody doesn't require that we share reasons for doing so, right? My reason for sharing a ride with you could be very different from your reason for sharing a ride, right? We might be both going downtown, but we might be doing very different things downtown. Okay. And a reason for doing one's part in joint action is proprietary when it is not shared with the other participants, right? So I have my proprietary reasons for going downtown. You have your proprietary reasons for going downtown. Now, it's an important feature about our sociality that we can manage to share intentions and act together in the face of substantial differences of reasons for which we participate. This is especially characteristic of a pluralistic, liberal culture. This is the pervasiveness of partiality in our sociality. That is a quote from Michael Bratman. So he thinks that this idea that we have proprietary reasons and that it's compatible with our sharing intentions and acting together is very important, right? Especially in this kind of society. And it's not merely important, but it's like very prevalent, right? That we don't share the reasons for the intention or the action that we engage in together. Okay. So as a consequence, Bratman thinks that shared intention, not to mention institutional intentions and things like that, often lack the corresponding shared reasons, right? The reasons that are involved are all kind of proprietary and private. They could be shared, right? But very often they are not, right? And so very often you're going to have these kind of shared intentions that have no shared reasons. Okay. So the question that I'm left with at this point is the following: is the pervasiveness of proprietary reasons in shared agency compatible with the entitlement thesis? Okay. If the interpersonal shared intentions underlying entitlement function to preserve and transmit reasons across individuals or groups of individuals, how can reasons, the reasons involved, remain proprietary? Okay. So I'm out of time now, and so I'm just going to leave with having raised that question. Although I will try, like I do try on the next slide to kind of reconcile this kind of tension between the possibility of proprietary reasons and my thesis about entitlement. Okay, and that's that last slide. Okay, well, thanks for listening, and I hope to see you at other meetings in the conference.